ask unanimous consent that the quorum call be lifted.
Without objection.
Mr. President, on October 23rd, a genocidal militia called the Rapid Support Forces, also known as the RSF, entered the city of El Fasher in the Darfur region of Sudan. Countless reports describe how they murdered men and boys and raped women and girls. Credible reports indicated that RSF fighters entered a maternity hospital and slaughtered 460 people, doctors, nurses, patients, and their loved ones. They turned the city into a killing field, going house to house, rounding up people to torture and murder because of their ethnicity. RSF forces entered a shelter for displaced people near Al Fasher University and raped at least 25 women at gunpoint. Over 100,000 survivors have fled the city, making it out, trying to take the roads, but the RSF has targeted those who try to escape. The massacre has been so brutal and so bloody, we can see it from space. The Yale Humanitarian Research Lab has flagged satellite photos that appear to show incidents of mass killings with dozens of unarmed people lying dead and sand stained with blood. In late October, the same Yale lab was told that more than 10,000 people were killed in 3 days. Human rights groups also report that hundreds of unaccompanied children, some carrying babies, have fled El Fasher to other Sudanese towns seeking to escape the violence. Mr. President, sadly, we've seen this story before because the RSF have a horrible history and lineage. They are part of what is known as the Janjaweed militias, who committed genocide in Darfur 20 years ago. And they want to continue the Janjaweed's genocidal mission of eliminating other ethnic groups. I do want to salute the journalists and human rights analysts who are working to expose these terrible truths. But it's up to us as to what we do with that truth. And the truth is, this could have been prevented. We had warning, and we could have done more to stop it, and we can still do more now to stop the ongoing genocide. Al Fasher was under siege for 18 months. The civil war in Sudan has been raging for 2.5 years. More than 150,000 people have died, and approximately 14 million have been displaced in Sudan, marking the largest and fastest displacement crisis in the world. Earlier this year, at the beginning of his administration, Donald Trump gutted USAID and suddenly cut off our humanitarian aid to Sudan. More than 1,000 soup kitchens closed overnight. While others have stepped up, the vacuum left by AID's departure means that even more innocent people are dying. And even as we cut humanitarian aid for the victims of genocide, we have not effectively used our leverage and influence to end the war. Because throughout this conflict, we, the United States, have continued to send weapons to the United Arab Emirates, the UAE, who we know are arming the murderous RSF. Report after report from the United Nations, human rights organizations, and journalists have provided evidence that the UAE is doing this. In fact, Mr. President, in January of this year, the Biden administration confirmed to me directly that the UAE was providing material support to the RSF, even though the UAE had assured the United States that it wasn't and that it wouldn't. So this is not a question for debate. And in fact, if the UAE is not supplying the RSF with weapons, then they should have no concerns about this legislation. And around the same time that I heard from the Biden administration about the UAE supplying the RSF, the U.S. government concluded what is clear from plain sight, that the RSF and their allied militias are committing genocide in Darfur. According to the State Department's assessment, and I quote, "The RSF and allied militias have systematically murdered men and boys, even infants, on an ethnic basis, and deliberately targeted women and girls from certain ethnic groups for rape and other forms of brutal sexual violence. The same militias have targeted fleeing civilians, murdering innocent people escaping conflict, and prevented remaining civilians from accessing life-saving supplies." End of quote from the State Department of the United States. So we know this has been going on. We've known it for years. And the Trump administration has reiterated the finding by the Biden administration State Department that the RSF is engaged in genocide in Darfur. Mr. President, we are not helpless. We are not innocent bystanders in the face of these unspeakable crimes. We have leverage. We just need the political will to use it. And I should say, Mr. President, we recognize that the RSF is not the only party to this conflict in Sudan. The State Department has determined that the Sudanese armed forces, known as the SAF, have also committed atrocities throughout this war. And there are also other external actors fueling the war in Sudan, including countries like Turkey, Egypt, Iran, Russia, and others. I commend the U.S. mediators who've been trying to bring peace to the region, both in the previous administration and now. But at the same time, we've got to recognize, after 2.5 years and after all the bloodshed and the ongoing genocide, that talk is not enough, that we have to use at least the leverage we have and use our influence more effectively when it comes to the UAE and its arming of the RSF. I would gladly work with my colleagues across the aisle to say that the United States should not be supplying U.S. military assistance to any country that is fueling the ongoing war and genocide. But surely we can agree that we should begin by not providing weapons to a country that is in turn fueling a genocide, what we've determined is a genocide in Darfur. And I should say, Mr. President, that Secretary Rubio, during his confirmation hearing for Secretary of State, was asked about this very issue. And here's what he said, and I quote, "We need to raise the fact that they," referring to the UAE, "are openly supporting an entity that is carrying out a genocide," end quote. That was Secretary Rubio nominee. But I asked the Secretary, and I asked the President, I asked my colleagues, if we agree that there's a genocide going on, and we agree that it's being committed by the RSF, shouldn't we agree that we should at least pause the transfer of weapons to the UAE, which is fueling the genocide in Darfur? And why haven't we done that? Well, Mr. President, Donald Trump visited the UAE over the summer. Instead of demanding accountability for their role in the genocide in Darfur, he gave away the crown jewels of American AI. And many of our most sophisticated chips were promised to the UAE. In return, a UAE-backed firm gave the Trump family's newly launched stablecoin business a $2 billion boost. And it was just days before President Trump visited the UAE that the administration greenlit the sale of $1.4 billion of arms to the UAE. What about the genocide they were fueling in Darfur? Did he say anything about that? It doesn't seem that he raised those issues during his visit to the UAE. In fact, President Trump said just yesterday in a speech that Sudan was, quote, "not on my charts," unquote, until the Saudi crown prince brought it to his attention. Really, President Trump? This has been going on for 2.5 years. You've been sending military assistance to the UAE that in turn is fueling the RSF's murderous rage in Darfur. And it just wasn't on the president's charts until yesterday. What was on his charts was all the corrupt deals that were going down in the UAE. So, Mr. President, here are the facts. The UAE is aiding and abetting a genocide in Darfur. Meanwhile, the Trump administration has been providing highly sophisticated U.S. technology to the UAE, removed many of the safeguards that have been in place to prevent that technology from falling into China's hands, and shipping them advanced technology and deadly weapons, while a UAE state-owned company invested $2 billion in the Trump family's crypto scheme. Now, earlier this year, in the summer, Senator Murphy and I, along with colleagues, filed a joint resolution of disapproval to try to stop those weapon sales to the UAE, sending a message or trying to send a message that United States foreign policy could not be manipulated by corrupt bargains. Unfortunately, that effort failed. Mr. President, if we want to stop the ongoing horrors in Sudan, we need to begin by applying our leverage and stop the UAE from funneling weapons to the RSF. That's why I've been working for years during this conflict with Congresswoman Sarah Jacobs. We introduced a bill. It's called the Stand Up for Sudan Act. It would prohibit the United States from selling weapons to the UAE until the president certifies that the UAE is not arming the RSF. So if the UAE is really not doing this, they shouldn't have to worry about it because President Trump won't make that certification. And Mr. President, I acknowledge that the UAE is an important partner to the United States. But that doesn't mean that even with partners, we shouldn't use our leverage to stop them from fueling a genocide. I remember many days when Senator Rubio took to the floor of this Senate, and he talked about having an American foreign policy based on values and principles, on human rights, on self-determination. That has all gone out the window in this administration. It seems like a quaint thing. But, Mr. President, it doesn't have to be a quaint thing in this body, in this Senate, where senators can stand up for our values and can make sure we exercise our leverage to prevent the ongoing genocide in Darfur. I'm going to close with a story about an orphan boy in Sudan. He told the Norwegian Refugee Council in the New York Times that, quote, his parents and siblings were killed in a strike as they tried to flee al-Fasher. On a broken foot, he wandered alone to the northern gates of the city until others who were fleeing put him on a truck to another city. Then he told reporters, quote, now I'm here alone. At night, I find places where people gather and sleep on the ground near them. I hope someone helps me. Mr. President, that boy needs our help. Thousands of innocent people need our help. And for goodness sakes, we could take one small step to exercise just some of our influence to end the ongoing genocide in Darfur. And that is by adopting the resolution that Congresswoman Jacobs and I have put forward. So, Mr. President, I ask unanimous consent that the Committee on Foreign Relations be discharged from further consideration of S-935 and the Senate proceed to its immediate consideration. Further, that the bill be considered read a third time and passed, and the motion to reconsider be considered made and laid upon the table.
Is there objection?
Reserving the right to object, Mr. President.
Senator from Iowa.
Mr. President, I object. The United Arab Emirates is a close partner with whom we have vital cooperation on regional security, counterterrorism,